Continuing on my journey of the Mission Impossible franchise, I have reached the third installment in the franchise and I watched Mission Impossible 3, the one that came out in 2006. It is the sequel to the 1996 Mission Impossible and the 2000 Mission Impossible 2, and it is the third installment in the Mission Impossible film series. J.J. Abrams took the directorial chair this time, and this is his directorial debut, at least for feature films. This is the first film that J.J. Abrams directed, and it kind of shows because prior to films he was directing TV shows, and there are aspects of that in this film wherein they used way too many close-up shots, and this is something even the director himself has admitted, and that is that there was way too many close-up shots of people. And I think the reason for that is because when you're watching a TV show on a TV, it's a much smaller screen, so the canvas or the screen size is very, very small. So what most directors do is that they bring the camera closer to their face, but then they utilize the close-up shots more often. And this being J.J. Abrams' first feature film, he kind of utilized that throughout this movie, and it really shows. But the movie is very action-packed. There is a lot of tension, and I felt like this is what laid the foundation for future Mission Impossible films, and it does not get enough recognition in my book. It is an excellent, well-made film. This movie felt like the creators of this movie took some of the responses from the previous Mission Impossible film, the Mission Impossible 2, and they corrected it, and they made this movie a bit more character driven or a bit more emotional than the previous one. Because if you've watched my previous video on Mission Impossible 2, one of my major problems with that movie is that the execution was much more similar to a mass Telugu movie, and the way the movie was made, it never felt like it was a Mission Impossible film. It felt more like a later Pierce Brosnan Bond films. That's what the movie felt like, and it kind of completely missed what Mission Impossible was all about. But the action scenes were pretty good. It is still very entertaining. Coming back to this film took notes from that and made it better. This felt more like a Mission Impossible film, and this felt more like Ethan Hunt. You see Ethan Hunt vulnerable. I heard that the actress from the previous film, the love interest from the previous film, was supposed to be in this movie, but she stated that she won't be able to do it as she wanted to focus more on her family. And so after a whole bunch of back and forth, Michelle Monaghan was finalized, and she is consistent throughout the later installments as well as Ethan Hunt's love interest, and she does fine work in the film. I love her character. I love what she represents to the hero, and I like her contribution, especially in the climax when after Ethan Hunt teaches her how to use the gun. I love the action scene that happens after that. I loved every bit of it. There's a lot of tension-filled scenes in the movie, and I love it. And I love what she represents as well, as I stated before, and that is that she is the life that Ethan Hunt wishes he had, or is the life that Ethan Hunt desires but can never get. And I kind of like that, and I kind of like how they end the movie happily, but in the later installments you know what's going to happen, which I'll get to in those. This is also one of the least memorable Mission Impossibles, because while it did make a ton of money, enough to spawn more sequels, it was still the least grossing of the whole franchise. The villain is very weak. Philip Seymour Hoffman, while he gives a very strong performance, like he is menacing as hell in this movie, performance wise there is no doubt he gave the character justice, but as a character he's pretty weak. There isn't much to him, and that's constant for most of them. And in the later films you will get to know them better, and Simon Pegg and Ving Rhames, both of them will be more consistent in the later franchises. They have great personalities, but nothing in terms of actual character building moments. There's no character development. I feel like that was what made this movie one of the more least memorable things, but it is still an awesome movie. Like, you cannot deny that the action in this movie is fantastic, especially the Shanghai scene where Ethan Hunt has to jump from a building. That is one of the best action scenes in the film. And another one would be after he comes down from the building, near the end of that scene, he is stopped by what is a car that is just centimeters away from his hand. I think it even hit him, but it's centimeters away. If you've seen the previous Mission Impossible and if you've seen the future ones as well, there are so many more memorable scenes because Ethan Hunt, or sorry, in this case Tom Cruise, literally puts his life in danger and does so much of crazy stunts in the future installments and in the previous one as well. But in this film, it's fairly limited. You don't get to see that as much. And that is one of a major drawback for me. I wanted some more of that, but I still like the bridge scene. Even that is so much tension filled, like so much shit happens. And one of the things that made this movie great for me is that it treated the characters as human. The mistake John Woo made in Mission Impossible 2 is that he made the characters, as especially Ethan Hunt, as not only James Bond but also like this mass hero, and that's not what I watch Ethan Hunt for, or what I know Ethan Hunt as. They made him look far more human in this film than in the previous installment, and that's what I love. Like, you can see that he gets hurt, he's vulnerable, he's emotes a lot more, especially if you look at the first scene. It's nothing but emotion, and there's very less of this mass execution here, and that's what I love from this film. And even the dialogues feel a lot more like natural as compared to the previous one. By most standards, or by most aspects, it is an overall improvement over the first one. Even the cinematography is great, although there are certain instances in the film where I felt like instead of putting the camera in hand or shaking the camera a bit, just use a tripod so that we can see what's happening, because the action scenes are cut like this. Sometimes it cuts so fast, and I kind of felt like scenes similar to that 20-second uninterrupted running scene of Tom Cruise. If there were shots, action scenes similar to that, it would have been far more engaging. While it is engaging, I felt like if there was more shots similar to that incorporated into the action scenes, it would have been more engaging than what we have currently gotten. And speaking of Tom Cruise running, yeah, as I mentioned before, there is a long scene of Tom Cruise running, I think around 20 seconds or so, and this is the movie that I remember Tom Cruise running being a trend. I felt like this is the movie that started it. At least it is the first time that I saw Tom Cruise running. It was when I was seeing Mission Impossible, and then after this, every movie that I saw of him afterwards has Tom Cruise running. But I love seeing it because the dude can run, man. Come on. He does it well, is what I'm saying. I like the inclusion of Laurence Fishburne as well. He's his boss, and at first I did not like the first twist that happens. Initially I did not like it. I want to put an emphasis on that. Initially I did not like that because it felt like it was the first movie all over again. It was similar to the first movie all over again. But as the movie progresses, you see why it was happening like that, and the actual twist happens, and it was predictable. But maybe those watching for the first time, it might be unpredictable for some, but I knew it was going to happen. And it's been years since I watched it, and it is the least memorable one, but it is the more memorable villain to me. And coming back to Laurence Fishburne, I like his portrayal of the boss. He's the boss, and he wants things done a certain way. He wants everything by the book, and I kind of like how he leads the team. There's some corporate action going on here. I like that. I also like the inclusion of Maggie Q and Jonathan Rhys Meyers. I felt like they were great additions. I also like some of the product placements. Some I got noticed instantly, like the Lamborghini. Come on. And I like the bathroom scene with Tom Cruise. The second movie made the masks way more prominent, and while that movie was the inspiration for most Indian films, in this movie, in this installment, you get to see how the masks are made, and I love that. There is a significant amount of time dedicated to Tom Cruise and Ving Rhames, Luther, preparing the Philip Seymour Hoffman mask. The texture, the eyebrows, everything, the body suit, like you get to see how that is done, and I enjoyed that a lot. Even the voice chip, I enjoyed it. It was fun, and some of the shots are very, very engaging, very interesting as well. I enjoyed the locations as well. It's fantastic how they shot in Vatican, Berlin, Rome, even Shanghai. It's beautiful, and the shots are so beautiful. I also love the stunts in the movie, and overall it is a very entertainment, adrenaline filled film. And while the action does get in the way of character building moments, I feel like if you watch this movie purely for the entertainment factor, you watching it and if you want to watch Ethan Hunt being more emotionally vulnerable or being more emotional than the previous ventures, where the mission is the focal point. The missions are given more prominence in this movie as compared to the missions being something of a background to the action. So if you're into all that, I would definitely recommend this. Michelle Monaghan, I loved her inclusion in the film and in the future installments as well. And I love how she affects Ethan Hunt even in the future installments, even in this film, especially in this film. She's more prominent in this film, I feel like, than in the future installments. And I enjoyed that. I like the ideal family execution in the beginning parts of the movie where Ethan Hunt is living the life he desired. But we all know what happens later on. And I love the action scenes in Shanghai, especially the climax. I enjoyed that a lot. I feel like it is one of the more memorable climaxes for me, especially when he just teaches her how to use the gun, but she immediately, like, how she thinks in that moment. I enjoyed that a lot. And the way she strategized just after knowing how to use a gun, that is like the best scene for me, aside from the Shanghai scene where Tom Cruise jumps to the other building. That scene, I also like the tension in this film, and I loved this movie overall. It is a very enjoyable watch despite a few flaws here and there. If you haven't watched it already, or if you've forgotten about this movie, I highly recommend you watch it. It really deserves more recognition than what Rotten Tomatoes is showing me. It really does deserve way more recognition, and especially at this today's time, I feel like it holds up way more even now. And I feel like it is a fantastic start to a great career for J.J. Abrams. And yeah, if it's on an OTT platform, I highly recommend you watch it. It is one of the best action films for a reason. This is the foundation of Mission Impossible. It is a very good foundation. It is so much better than the predecessor, Mission Impossible 2. If you're more into the mass action type of film, then I would recommend Mission Impossible 2. But if you want a more character driven or more emotionally driven Mission Impossible, then I recommend you start with Mission Impossible 3.
Shut me down and there's no witness. Got me in my feels, she would never listen. All the alcohol is in my liver. I guess I lost and you're the winner. Missing your touch, you were a good kisser. I was born a saint, but now I'm a sinner.